Looks like we hit pay dirt. That's a vampire mark. Means that there's a safe house around here somewhere. A place they can go if dawn is coming. See the valets over there? They're vampires. So's the doorman. And the whore in the corner.
How can you tell?
By the way they move. The way they smell.
It's like a bad dream.
There are worse things out tonight than vampires.
Like what?
Like me.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
And me.
Very good. And now, I want you to cast your mind back to another decade. It's coming towards the end of the decade. Comic book movies have been successful in the past, but they're flagging a bit. Mm-hmm. The year ends in 8.
Okay.
And now we have a new film. A film with an African-American lead.
Yeah.
And African-American co-star. And the film, of course, is Black Panther.
Yeah, wow.
No, not Black Panther. No. Forget that. Cast your mind back exactly 20 years earlier to 1998.
Yeah.
Everything I just said still applies. The movie is Blade.
Oh, is that 2018 was Black Panther? Okay.
It certainly was.
All right. Well, yeah, we just passed the 25th anniversary of Blade. So here we are. It was the first theatrical release for Marvel after Howard the Duck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so we read a bunch of... Oh, we got to do pause the podcast first.
Okay.
So we read a bunch of Tomb of Draculas for this.
Yes.
Mostly, and also some Adventures into Fear and Vampire Tales. A couple of issues of Vampire Tales.
It's an eclectic bunch.
Yes, they were all the early, much like the early Punisher appearances, they were scattered all over the place, including in some of the black and white magazines. Mm-hmm. So do we need to...
I suppose...
I'm going to say, there is a spoiler in the Blade movie.
Yep.
There's a twist.
There's definitely twists. Look, if you haven't seen Blade, go see Blade.
Yeah,
and then
actually,
come back.
I'm going to say pause because actually I just thought there's a couple of twists, things that are revealed as the movie progresses, so...
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, you haven't read the comic, whoever you are, so... and you never will. But just go and read go and watch the film.
Yeah.
And then come back. Alright.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Okay, so...
And now we're going to talk about the comic.
We're going to talk about Tomb of Dracula.
Yes.
Which is a series that ran from 1972 to 1979. 70 issues.
Wow. That's amazing, considering...
Well, it was, very much, there was a kind of relaxing of the comics code in the early 70s.
Sure.
And whenever you buy one, you always buy the pack. So, Universal, Hammer, Marvel, if you do Dracula, then you're also going to do Frankenstein and a Wolfman. And Marvel certainly did all three, but the others weren't as successful. Although, Werewolf by Night, we just had a... TV MCU Werewolf by Night came out. I haven't heard anybody say anything about it, but it exists. It's on the Disney Channel somewhere.
Brilliant. And of course, these are... Speaking of Wolfman...
Yes. Yeah, so from about issues 6 or 7, Marv Wolfman came on as the writer. Mm-hmm. And Dracula is not the protagonist in these stories. He is the antagonist, and we've got a team of vampire hunters that are chasing him. They're the protagonists, despite the title.
But he's in every issue, pretty much.
Yes, he's in every
He's really the star.
He's the star. That's a good way to put it. And then Wolfman had planned a 3-issue finale. These were drawn by Gene Colan, doing maybe some of the best work of his career. It's absolutely awesome stuff. He was really peaking in this period. He did a run on Doctor Strange, I think, just before this as well. That was really amazing as well. And so they had written and drawn the final 3 issues. It was going to tie up everything.
Yep.
They just needed to go to issue 71, and Jim Shooter was no, we're canceling at issue 70.
Jim Shooter's back.
And Marv Wolfman was like, okay, so he cut the final issue. He somehow cut the panels up, all those beautiful layouts that Gene Colan had done, and had to rearrange them into some sort of conclusion. And then, of course, he left Marvel, and the next year we had Teen Titans C.
Yes. Well, Tomb of Dracula, probably most famous today for an obscure side character.
Very obscure side character, Blade, who showed up in issue 10 with no backstory. He just shows up as a character that the other characters already know. And they already know his methods. They're like, Blade, you're too violent. You gotta play by our rules. And they're like, it's you again. It's that kind of stuff where, as if this guy's been around since issue 1, but we've never met him before.
No, and I mean, he's so familiar because he's kind of a cliche, isn't he?
Yes.
He's essentially a blaxploitation vampire hunter.
This is a 1 to 2 years after Dracula came out, right?
Yeah, it's
so,
not a coincidence.
Yeah, absolutely. At Marvel, it's 2 years, just like Punisher, it's just 2 years later, here's our version of Death Wish or Dirty Harry or whatever.
That's amazing. And, I mean, when he's introduced, it's fantastic. He has an afro.
Yeah.
And he wears yellow goggles.
Yellow-tinted goggles, yeah.
Like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or something. Why does he wear these goggles? There's no reason why he would wear these goggles. He talks in a manner similar to Cyborg in Teen Titans.
Yeah, Mother Love and Space Warp kind of stuff. Yeah, very similar to Luke Cage, actually. Where's my money, honey? Those lines, those hilarious lines. Unintentionally hilarious lines.
I wrote down a bunch of them. Yeah, my God, they're so... And, so despite being from England... Apparently he's English.
Well, it was very confusing, because I was like, okay, why is this guy saying American? Because we didn't get his backstory. And then we got his origin, which was in England. I was like, okay, maybe he was born in England, but then grew up in the state.
No.
But then we get a Chris Claremont story in one of the black and white magazines, which is very clear, like, this guy was in England the whole time. And I'm like,
playing jazz trumpet.
Why does he say...
Why does he talk like this? Because he's street. Because he's Shaft, basically.
Yes. So he goes around with, he's got like a bandolier with like stakes in it that he uses to kill vampires with.
Well, specifically, they are wooden knives.
Yes.
Made from teak, mostly.
Right.
Which is, I mean, they're stakes. S-T-A-K-E.
Yeah.
But the twist is that it's gone to all the trouble of carving them to have wooden handles.
Yes.
And wooden kind of like blades. Hence the name Blade.
We don't know why his name is Blade, because some people call him Mr. Blade. Many times he's called Mr. Blade, so we have to assume it's his last name.
Sure.
Yes, and he's also, we get a bit of origin in the black and white magazines. One of which was written by...
Well, we do get an origin for him in Tomb of Dracula.
Yes, in issue 13.
Right.
Yes.
Which is that his mother was bitten by a vampire.
They really...
when he was born.
Yes.
And
they really skirt around the code here, because they don't mention that she's working in a brothel. It's just the way it's presented and the way Gene Colan has drawn it, and they never mention it all. In the black and white, they hilariously keep calling them courtesans. But they don't use any words like that. It's just completely implied. But yeah, she seems to have been a prostitute that she's giving birth, and
she's having a difficult labor, and they call for the doctor.
Yeah.
The doctor is a vampire.
Yes.
With white, slicked back hair.
Old dude.
And he's old, yep. He bites her and she dies. Blade recounts all this despite not being present and the room being empty except for the vampire.
Well, there's worse stuff in the movie compared to that, because he has flashbacks to his birth.
He does.
So.
Well, we'll get to that. I wonder if they're flashbacks or... We'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. You could generously say that it's his conscience.
So he's born anyway.
Yeah.
Somehow, despite this,
and this is his motivation. His mother was killed by vampires, and he wants to find the one that done it. And meanwhile, he's killing every vampire he can find.
Yes, and later in a Vampire Tales issue written by Chris Claremont, we get more background, which is that he was like this mentor, this old dude who was like a trumpet player.
Yep.
Picked him up off the streets, I think, and like trained him to kill. About vampire killing, and also how to play the trumpet. So he plays at a nightclub called Slow Boys, I think, where he goes...
Is it Slow Boys or Slow Joes? Or
I think it's Slow Boy.
Slow Boy.
So he goes to Slow Boys and he goes on stage, he plays the trumpet.
This is how he makes money to fund his vampire activities.
I guess, yeah.
Which is pretty rad. It's a shame Wesley Snipes didn't play trumpet.
Yeah, it's a bit of a Ron Swanson thing. Anyway, he's playing the trumpet and then going out and hunting vampires.
Yeah.
He's got this girlfriend named Saffron.
Yes, she's there consistently present in the Tomb of Dracula ones through to the Vampire Tales ones with Chris Claremont stuff.
But a couple of key points here is he's not a vampire in any way. He's just a human being.
Correct.
But it's mentioned that he seems to have an immunity to vampire bites. I guess this was introduced at some stage in Tomb of Dracula, in some issue I didn't read.
Yeah, it's in Tomb of Dracula. So they are hunting Dracula in Paris, the vampire hunting squad, which consists of Blade, a reluctant member, and a bunch of like random descendants of Van Helsing and Mina Harker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all named like Harker.
Yes.
There's another one, Hamilton, shows up later.
He wasn't in the ones I read.
No, he gets turned into a vampire.
Well, we'll get to him when if we ever do Blade Trinity.
Yeah.
Which I admit I want to do.
And Frank Drake, it starts with this guy, Frank Drake, who's a descendant of Dracula. So they're all like descendants of...
That's it. Yeah. It's Dracula the Next Generation.
Yeah.
And Dracula is Bones McCoy.
Yes.
There's a TNG reference for you there.
What's the line of descent? So Dracula had children that... I don't understand how this works.
Dracula never shuts up in the... these comics, by the way, I like them.
Yeah.
They're very funny.
Yeah.
And Dracula never shuts up in them.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. He's always talking himself up. He's always boasting.
Yeah, it's because it's tongue in cheek. It's I mean, it's not satire, but it feels...
tongue in cheek?
I reckon... Look, I can't help but think, because he's constantly hamming it up, hammering it up.
Yeah.
At one point he calls Blade his raven-fleshed foe.
Yeah, no, I actually think this is... So, because those first 6 issues were not written by Wolfman. They were written by, like, a random scattering of people like Archie Goodwin, some others, and I'm like... The writing's... It's purple prose all the way. We get it in Teen Titans, too. It was there to a certain extent.
Yes, it is similar to the Teen Titan writing style, so there's definite overlap. But I feel nonetheless that it's really ratcheted up with Dracula himself. And I feel like they're riffing on Dracula's melodramatic character from the movies, like the Hammer horror films and films like that. They are absolutely, I think, having a bit of fun with it. And it's funny. It's fun, it's lighthearted. I really...
It's lighthearted, but takes itself really seriously, I think.
Yes, it does.
The Hunters especially, they're like, it's so dire.
The Hunters are much more serious.
And I have to say, I was shocked by the number of people that got turned. Like, members of the team are getting killed by Dracula, turned. Yeah. That kind of stuff is happening a lot. Well, not a lot, but every couple of issues, it seems they almost were losing somebody.
Yes. But to circle back.
Yeah.
In one issue, Dracula, they are hunting him in Paris. They're trying to find and destroy his caskets with his ancestral earth in them.
Yeah.
And Blade has found one in the Paris catacombs. Dracula has sailed in seeking his rest, because the sun's coming up, or will shortly come up. Blade's there. Calls him all kinds of names. He'll call him Fangs. Pin the tail on the donkey, Fang face.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And then Dracula straight up kills him.
Right. Okay.
And then later on, some of the other vampire hunting squad find him.
Okay.
And they're set to... They know he'll rise because he's been killed, but surprisingly, he doesn't turn into a vampire. And in fact, he recovers.
Okay.
And it's dealt with like in a single line of dialogue. Van Helsing, the guy in the wheelchair, says, you must have been exposed to a certain amount of vampirism when you were born. You're inoculated.
Right. Okay.
And that's literally as far as it goes. And then later on, it's established... And then from that point on, it's established that Blade is immune to the bite of a vampire. He can't be turned.
Okay.
He's still baseline human.
Mm.
He doesn't have superpowers at this point.
Yeah.
But his power, as it were, is an immunity to the curse of vampirism.
Okay.
So that was a fun little digression.
Yep. Okay, so...
There's a funny... I'll tell you, to return to this thing, there's even later, in some of the later issues that I read, the characters are literally referring to how much Dracula is talking. Like there's one line which is... The vampire rattled on, shouting confidently of victory while I pressed my attack. And then the next panel refers to his ceaseless prattling. This is as they're fighting.
Those are the good guys. Usually villains are the ones that say, cease your ceaseless prattling, or something like that.
But I love it. And in a little point of trivia, Dracula's appearance, apparently based on Jack Palance.
Right, okay.
Who, of course, we know from Batman.
Yes.
And who, believe it or not, has played Dracula.
He did, yeah.
In a film, which came out after the Tomb of Dracula.
Well, that's a shocker, because I assumed that he was based on Jack Palance because he was in that version of Dracula.
Well, apparently that film came out in 1973.
Okay.
And Tomb of Dracula's first issue came out?
72.
Damn.
And April 72 cover date.
Isn't that extraordinary?
That is shocking.
I might even, if you'll indulge me again, listeners, I might even take this opportunity to read one of my favourite description of an actor ever, which is about Jack Palance.
Okay.
This appeared in a review, I think, in 1953. It's usually thought to be about him in Shane, but it's actually about a different film. His face alone, as thin and cruel as a rust-pitted spade, is enough to frighten a strong man. And to make matters worse, he seems to emit hostile energy, like something left overnight in a plutonium pile.
Wow.
Perfect guy to play Dracula, you'd think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know how much more we really need to go into these early appearances.
I'd hate to move on without talking about 90s Blade.
Okay, we'll get to, so
I don't mean the film, I mean...
Yeah, no, okay, so I'm just talking about the 70s, the Gene Colan stuff.
Okay.
Really beautifully drawn, we'll come back to all that stuff. Anyway, but there's kind of a gap so Blade shows up in this Tomb of Dracula series, 70 issues, from time to time. He's not in it all the time. He's in a scattering of issues.
Very minor character, yeah.
From 77 to 83, he just disappears.
Right.
So we get he's in a few of the black and white magazines.
Which are cool. So explain, what are these black and white magazines?
So the black and white magazines, Marvel published this line of magazine-sized comics that were in black and white with kind of more, I don't know if mature art is, it's like more... it's aimed at an older audience, let's say. And they're not subject to the code because they're a magazine, I guess because they have a certain amount of text content that somehow they get over
just
the line.
Just like Mad Magazine.
So they tend to be a little bit more edgy, I guess you could call it. Like the second two Punisher appearances after Spider-Man, or very early on, were in the magazine. But then there's a gap. So 1983, he shows up in a couple of issues of Doctor Strange.
Right, I didn't read those.
Yeah, and I had this I have this issue 62, which I've owned for a very long time, and it is from 83, so it's one of the 3 appearances of Blade. And in this issue, Doctor Strange casts a spell which eliminates every vampire on Earth and cures Hannibal King. And Blade is in it. He's one of the team that's helping Doctor Strange cast the spell. And it's like...
Was he still wearing his green parka and his bandoliers
he might be, yes.
His yellow
Steve
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar style goggles?
Yeah, the art is by Steve Leiloha, I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he's trying to do Gene Colan, probably because Marvel asked him to. But even Dracula's turned into dust in this issue.
Whoa!
And there are no more vampires and Hannibal King is cured. But, I guess they all come back at some stage somehow, despite the spell. So there's like 2 or 3 issues of Doctor Strange. Then there's another gap until 1991, when there's a Tomb of Dracula relaunch, which is a few issues, maybe 4 issues, and Blade's in those. Then in 1992, we get a comic called Night Stalkers, which is about Blade, Frank Drake, and Hannibal King, kind of like assembled as a team, reassembled by Doctor Strange. That goes for 18 issues, and then it's canceled.
Right.
And then we get 1994, Blade, so around the same period, gets his own series, just called Blade, Vampire Hunter, lasts for 10 issues. So the point I'm trying to get to is, this character is not popular in any way.
No, this is a good
They're
point.
bringing him in once in a while. He's making a couple of appearances. They tried to launch him in Night Stalkers, canceled after less than 2 years. Tried to give him his own series, doesn't even last a year, 10 issues, and it just keeps getting canceled. And that we can talk about the 94 series because this is the last Blade series before the movie comes out. Yeah. So there's not much Blade content. There's the few, maybe 20 issues of Tomb of Dracula, the black and whites, and then these weird team-up issues, and these very 90s, super 90s 2 series, one written by Ian Eddington, I think it is, and drawn by, I don't know, but one of those guys that just draws like Marvel people did in the 90s.
Like Rob Liefeld wannabe crap.
Trying to be, like that was Marvel, and it wasn't necessarily their fault, it was like Marvel was hiring those people because they wanted that look.
Yeah.
Or telling them to draw that way, or hiring them before they were ready to draw because they were drawing like, to be professional because they were drawing like life. I mean, there was a swamp of these comics in the 90s.
We won't talk about this too much, but yeah, like this Blade comic from 1994 is awful.
Yeah.
And it's just so everything we said about Bloodshot, just again, just ugly art, ridiculous, overdeveloped physiques, veins popping out, tattoos.
And also like cliches, like he's trying to retire from being a vampire hunter. He's ready to give it up.
Crummy, like pretentious, like awful, charmless, pretentious dialogue.
Yeah.
A mistaken attempt to make it really mature by having themes like dumb names like the Bad Seeds to name the vampires.
And they've got some
crazy
drug. They've got some crazy plan. They've got all these people hooked up.
Yeah,
to machines and stuff.
And they're extracting... It's just so 90s. Like, a mistaken... Like, mixing, like, crappiness... Mistaking crappiness for maturity.
Yeah.
You know, like, there's the vampire drugs. So they're making a drug out of their bodies, and you take it and you turn into a vampire. Except you're also addicted to the drug. So you're a servant of the baddie.
Okay, yeah, right.
It's just terrible. Although, there is a nightclub filled with vampires in it.
Yes.
And Blade's lost his trademark afro. I'm not sure if... I assume he didn't have the afro in Night Stalkers and stuff like that.
I don't think so. And even in this 83 Doctor Strange, you can see his hair's cut closer.
His hair looks like the hair in the film, in this 1994 one. And Blade himself is looking like... He's ditched the teak knives, and he now has a samurai sword.
Yeah.
And he's wearing leather. There's spikes and some other very extreme 90s stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a definite visual connection, I think, between this iteration of Blade and the one we get in the film.
Yeah.
Certainly not in the way that where the with the 70s version with his afro and his parka. Yeah. Where he looks like he looks like a kung fu guy from a blaxploitation film.
Yeah. So there's no... When the movie comes out in 98, there is no Blade comic on the stands. And not just one to... not just one to inspire the movie, but in the sense that Marvel doesn't even have a tie-in comic out. They're like, some piece of shit movie's going to come out. It's going to be like Howard the Duck, I guess, is what their assumption is. And they don't even bother putting out a tie-in.
Yeah. And they don't own... They own Blade, but they've licensed this to this film. So this isn't Marvel Studios. This isn't
there is no Marvel Studios.
No, precisely. Yeah. So, yeah.
Even after Spider-Man and X-Men, there's no Marvel Studios.
No.
Yeah.
That's right. It's not till Iron Man, right?
But those at least had comics.
Yeah.
But I mean, like when Batman 89 comes out, they've got a movie adaptation comic book out. There's nothing like that for Blade. We don't get another Blade comic until after this is out, and then they start putting out some titles, especially as tie-ins to the sequel. Not adaptations, but there is like a Blade title on the stands. Like there's even a Marvel Max series with Tim Bradstreet covers. Yeah. When the second one comes out, or the third one, something like that.
I think this is an important point. This is not a film that can rely on a pre-existing audience that's aware of Blade.
Yes, exactly.
So you presumably were aware of Blade. But
only vaguely, even. Because I'd read this one issue of Doctor Strange. I knew who this dude... And I knew about Night Stalkers because I read some issues of Night Stalkers.
I think we all know you well enough by now to know that you're the exception in this case.
But even if you'd asked me, tell me about Blade, I would have been... He's a guy in Night Stalkers? Right. Like, I don't know anything about him.
I certainly had no idea that Blade was even based on a comic. It wasn't part of the marketing.
That's why this podcast is here.
Yeah. Yeah. I eventually found out years and years later. Right. But I went and saw Blade at the cinemas. Yeah. 1998 Blade. And I didn't know that it was based on a comic. Right. The fact that it's based on a comic is nowhere in the marketing. You don't get a sense watching it that it's particularly a comic. No,
I think even the credit was a bit weird. It was like based on characters created by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan.
That's exactly right. That is what it says.
I don't even know if it says based on the comic book.
No, good point.
It doesn't say based on Tim of Dracula. Or I can't remember. I have to look it up again.
Well, it does specifically mention Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan. Yeah. Because apparently David S. Goyer, the writer of the film, pushed for them to be recognised.
Well, interesting, because Marv Wolfman was suing Marvel at this time.
Yeah.
For...
They're unrelated.
He was like, he was trying... It's the usual thing. It was not work for hire, was his argument. And they're like, maybe so, but... just going by Wikipedia, the courts are like, well, maybe it was not work for hire, but you should have sued 20 years ago. Because they've continued to exploit this character very... in 20 issues or so, but...
he sued for, I think, $35 million he sued for, but it did not find in favour of him.
Of course not, no.
And also, when, according to Goyer, when he pushed for both of them to be recognised as the creators of Blade, apparently Marv Wolfman's people got in touch with him and said that it should only be Marv Wolfman that's being recognised as the creator of Blade.
Okay.
This is from Goyer himself in an interview I read.
I guess because his people would have known that it would mess up their court case.
It's very, very...
If there was another name on there, then it would really mess things up for them, trying to prove that he owned this thing that he created for Marvel.
That's very plausible.
I guarantee you... Well, I shouldn't say guarantee. Okay, I'm going to bet that Marv Wolfman did not design the jacket and the bandolier and the glasses. I bet you, because artists do that at Marvel.
Yep.
And also at the time they would have been working Marvel method, I'm guessing, which means the scriptwriter just goes, pages 1 to 3, a dude named Blade showed up. Blade shows up and he fights some vampires. Pages 4 to 6, we get a scene with Frank Drake, berating his girlfriend for going out when it's dangerous, something like that. And then it would come back to the writer, and then the writer would script over whatever the artist came up with. It would be very hard under those circumstances to say, I'm the sole creator of Blade and you owe me $35 million.
Well, it didn't get up.
No.
He did not get his $35 million. All right.
But we just announced last week he's writing a What If Tomb of Dracula story for Marvel. So I guess water under the bridge, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's so
or
funny.
New management? I don't know.
I guess 25 years is long enough.
Yeah.
For you to go back. Someone tell Alan Moore.
Anything else we want to... Well,
I just want to reiterate your basic point, which is this is a film that did not have a tie-in comic based on an obscure character, which did not have a reliable kind of like pre-existent audience that would go and see this film because it was about a character that they knew from comic books. It wasn't in the zeitgeist, it wasn't in the public consciousness.
Yeah.
I certainly had never heard of him. And you, as you say, comics and uber nerd that you are, had barely heard of him.
And, but, I mean, we've got a MCU Blade movie
so we do.
Coming up in 2025 with Mahershala Ali in it.
The only reason we're getting that film is because of Wesley Snipes' Blade.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I can't imagine look, I'm trying to be open-minded, but how can it be good? How can it be good to have Blade interacting with Captain America and the X-Men and stuff? It's just so dumb.
That's another really good point. And I think we're coming around to what I think is one of the really important things that I realised as I was watching and preparing. This film, like the knowledgeable on the internet and so on, like to talk about Blade as the embryonic MCU film.
Yeah.
So, not X-Men, not Spider-Man.
Yeah.
If you're a smart guy, then you know that Blade is the original MCU
I think
film.
there's definitely a line from the leather outfit of Batman, 89, to the leather outfit of Blade, to the leather outfits in X-Men.
Yes, I think you could say that. However, Kumar, I don't agree with this interpretation.
Okay.
I don't consider this to be a precursor to the MCU.
Yeah.
I instead think that it's more influential in another genre, which we'll get into.
Okay.
But I think it was definitely inspirational.
Okay.
And I think you can definitely say there is a connection to Marvel movies, not least in that this is apparently the movie that convinced Marvel that they could... Well, this movie made a lot of money.
Yep.
It made more than $130 million.
Yeah.
Do you know how much money Marvel made from the sales?
I'm gonna guess $0. I'm gonna guess there was some kind of deal similar to the Swamp Thing deal at DC where the rights were sold and they were just desperate for, at that time, we'd have been desperate for legitimacy.
Yeah.
And Stan Lee...
Well, they'd just gone bankrupt, hadn't they, in 1996?
Yes, they had gone bankrupt. And Stan Lee spent the whole of the 80s and 90s schmoozing in Hollywood, trying to make comic books legitimate, which in their terms is legitimate entertainment. Not legitimate art, but legitimate as entertainment that could be like licensed properties that you could sell. So go ahead. How much money did they make?
It's a lot closer to zero than it is to 130 million.
Yeah.
Apparently, and I read this in more than one article, but I couldn't find a definite... I read it in more than one article, but they might have just been referencing one another. The figure is $25,000.
Okay, well, I believe it. I completely believe it, but I would also say it's also their fault for not putting out a Blade comic, having a Blade comic on the stands at the same time. They had no faith in that movie.
Yeah.
They had no faith in their own property. So who are they to say, oh, we should have got that $130 million?
Well, someone said it, and apparently it's part of what sets the ball rolling towards the mighty avalanche that is the MCU with Iron Man in 2007. Almost 10 years later.
Yeah.
But as for this being the first MCU movie...
No, of course not.
Or even a film that's like an MCU movie...
I would say no, it's not like an MCU.
I don't think
Except for the outfit.
I think even yeah, but I think I might as well get into it now. I've been teasing at it.
Yeah.
I think that this film is much more inspirational in the sense of The Matrix.
Okay, I had a question. So when did The Matrix come out exactly?
It comes out a year later.
No way!
Yeah.
My mind is blown because I was for sure, there's bullet time in this movie.
Yes, there is. There is bullet time.
And I was like, when I was watching this last night, my wife said, when did this come out? I was like, probably around the same 6 months, like The Matrix probably came out at the same time.
Proceed a whole year.
And we know the Wachowskis read comics and were into this stuff, so wowie zowie. Okay, that really changes my perspective on the movie, because the whole leather thing as well, and the flipping around.
It's
and all
not just that, the flipping.
When he throws his ninja star or whatever, and it goes around the room and comes back, that's such a Matrix shot.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, so that got borrowed. I was like, did they film this? Could they have set this up? I thought it was more like two things happening at the same time. It's just the zeitgeist. And there's no way they could have been... that Blade could have fed off of Matrix because it was too close, but I thought Matrix was 97, and I was off. It was 99.
That's right.
All right.
So, I've got my list here of... so, it's not just The Matrix. Mm-hmm. We got a whole... In the early 21st century, we have a whole series of films that are thematically and visually very similar.
Yeah.
So, we're talking leather.
Yes.
Black leather.
Yeah.
We're talking gloomy vibes and nighttime settings.
Okay.
We're talking specifically for mature audiences.
Yeah.
So mature themes.
Yeah.
Some of these films have R ratings, some of them don't. We're talking kung fu and bullet time.
Librium. Have you ever seen that? Or Equilibrium or whatever with Christian Bale? That one's high on the list.
You're anticipating my main point again. Very good. Techno soundtrack. And also...
I would say that Eon Flux, and there was another one, there was a vampire one with Mila Jovovich.
You're getting ahead of me.
Okay, all right.
You just got to be patient, Kumar.
Okay.
And also these also films that take themselves deeply seriously. Mm-hmm. So we have no Marvel style wisecracking, no levity. Mm-hmm. Very serious business, and also importantly, the theme of a secret world.
Right.
Underneath our world, a world we can't see.
What are all the underworld movies?
This is exactly it. So we're talking. You see, I'm so successful at making my point.
Yes.
That you're announcing all the movies that I'm about.
I hadn't thought I had made that. I should have made that connection. But anyway, I didn't make that connection.
As Kumar has already ruined, we've got The Matrix.
Yeah.
We've got Underworld with Kate Beckinsale, comic book movie Oblivion all-star Kate Beckinsale. Equilibrium is the film.
Is it called Equilibrium or called Librium? It's
called Equilibrium.
Okay.
And this, again, people wearing monochromatic gear.
And gun kata.
This is the film that invented gun kata. And it's Christian Bale.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, very serious kind of things, because it's about a brainwashed population, much like Matrix, who are being indoctrinated with drugs. Christian Bale's character stops taking the drugs and fights to free them. Yeah,
it's Soma from Brave New World.
It is.
Yeah.
And you are thinking of Resident Evil with Mila Jovovich.
No, I'm thinking of another one. I know Resident Evil, but it's maybe...
Well, Resident Evil's on my list because, again, nighttime, gloomy vibes, a lot of night settings, supernatural, and...
No, she was in some really dumb, future vampire movie.
Blood Rain. That's, But that's based on a video game.
No, it's not even Blood Rain. I'm gonna find it. Keep talking. I'll find it.
You do that, and I feel like these influences are much more important than the ones where Blade prefigures the MCU.
Okay.
There are some. You can see some MCU stuff in Blade. A modern setting as opposed to a historical one like Batman, Rocketeer, The Phantom, where they were all set sort of in an earlier epoch. Dude's being extraordinarily ripped, so Wesley Snipes is definitely in good shape, much better shape than everyone else in the movie.
Yeah.
Now, of course, everyone's in fantastic shape all the time.
We've talked about that. It's they've got these trainers, the Marvel trainers. Yeah. And the Marvel workout, whatever that is, it's usually secret.
Well, it's like the Marvel method.
Yes.
So we've got the highly choreographed action and characters not having a secret identity.
I will say, though, I actually forgot... the identity thing is interesting.
And also, I think, if we compare with Iron Man, we've got a performance defining a character, rather than vice versa, where the performance that the actor gives becomes the new version of that character.
Ultraviolet is the movie I was thinking.
Oh, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
But I think, what year did that come out?
That was 2006.
Well, it's a little late.
It's a vampire disease. Yeah, it's a future. It's set in the future.
How could it? I mean, Blade Trinity came out 2 years before that. How can there not be a creative debt?
Yeah,
Brilliant. So I think this is the cinematic world that Blade kicked off, and not the MCU.
Yeah, the thing I forgot about watching when I rewatched the movie yesterday. I've seen it twice before in the 90s. Was all the martial arts in it and how good Wesley Snipes is, and he must have been training beforehand. I don't think it was like Keanu Reeves who learned it for the role. I think Wesley Snipes was a martial artist.
Well, as the producer, he had a lot of input into this film.
Right.
He wanted it to be a martial arts film.
Because so much of it is like he throws his weapons away and fights vampires by doing like Aikido moves on them. I'm like, what is going on?
He knows his stuff.
Yeah.
And he wanted it to be like a Hong Kong action movie.
Right.
And apparently he came up with quite a bit of Blade's dialogue.
Right.
Apparently.
Okay.
I haven't seen the director's commentary, but I've heard people, this is hearsay, but I've heard people talking about watching the director's commentary. I've watched people talking about watching the director's commentary on YouTube. And they say that quite often Wesley Snipes would tell the director how the scene was going to end. I'll do it this way.
Okay.
I'll say this. And that's how the scene went.
I have to say there were some lines, I think it was in the trailer, was the line, "He makes the weapons, I use them," is so perfect. And his delivery is great, but it's such it's just so simple and straightforward. It just says it all. There was so much stuff like that. And the thing I always remembered, and it really hit me again watching yesterday, was when he smiles. He's so gleeful about killing the vampires. And sometimes he's got such that distinctive face, and then he has that smile, that grin when he kills them. So that goes back to you were saying about it was a performance more than the character, which, I mean, we haven't had that post Iron Man, really. And I think Marvel would lock that stuff down. Corporations hate that. They want the comic they want the elements to be substitutable. They want people to pay for the object, not the creators that are creating it.
Perfect. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. That's gratitude for you after Robert Downey Jr. single-handedly created the MCU with his performance.
But after,
that's gratitude.
I mean, they never... Think about most of the other actors were not like big names, except for like maybe Paul Rudd. Like
even Robert Downey Jr. wasn't. He was sort of
he was on
revived his career, wasn't it?
Well, there was a whole thing about how.
Anyway, this is a completely. We're not supposed to talk about Marvel movies.
I want to briefly mention that Marvel insured him. They were the only company that would insure him. I think on like maybe Dr. Dolittle or something like that. And after that, they were like, okay, we'll do this Iron Man thing because he stayed clean and sober.
Okay.
Wow. Anyway, all right.
Wow.
Okay.
All right. Well, we can't talk about Marvel.
All right. So let's talk about this movie.
All right. This film. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that we like it.
Oh my god, I loved it. And I hadn't watched it in 25 years, and I was really worried, like, is this going to be one of those things where I watch it and now it hasn't aged well? And I loved it again.
I think it's fine. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I really liked it. Okay, how does it start? We get the New Line logo. It's red. Great.
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah.
Very simple titles.
Yep. Just blood red.
Yep. Blood red. Simple titles. Then we get Blade. Small font. Brilliant. Everything about the start of this movie, I absolutely love.
Yeah.
God, what so short. It's straight into the film.
Yeah.
And then we get a fantastic transition to night. It's just a busy city.
Yeah.
It's like this is an environment, it's an ecosystem. We see it in fast forward, people bustling around, the sun sets, it's nighttime.
Yeah.
And as we see credits, it's so good.
The fast forward stuff is really stylish in this. And there's slow motion moments where I'm like, okay, it's like a logical slow motion moment. It's not like a Zack Snyder slow motion. It's like, oh, this has a storytelling reason to slow down or to do this in fast forward, which is interesting when we get to talking about the director later on, because I don't think he ever replicated anything.
Well, he doesn't have an enormous filmography.
No, but okay. So it starts in 1967.
Right, yes.
Which actually places Blade at the same age he would have been in the comic, which I think they say he's 28 or 29 or something like that. And this woman is bitten by she's been bitten by a vampire. Pregnant woman is bitten by a vampire, so they do a C-section, pull out the baby.
Yep.
And then we cut to the present.
This scene is really, really good.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the best introduction scene of any superhero film. I mean, if this could even be called a superhero film.
And I also like that. I think
everybody remembers this. Anyone who's seen Blade will remember this scene.
Absolutely.
Which is-
And I would say in the 90s, you remember all the nightclub scenes with the dance music in the 90s, that house music?
Yep.
And this is one of those, but somehow this one really sticks. Well, I know why it sticks in memory, but
Yeah.
I'd kind of forgotten bits. Like, I've forgotten that Tracy Lords was in it.
She's barely in it. She had
as the-
third billing in this film.
Yeah. But
She's in it for about
she's got a good agent.
30 seconds.
She's got a good agent. So she's bringing this guy. And first line is like, what does he say about, you want to see my missile or my pocket rocket?
It's a heat seeker.
It's a heat seeker. This is the first line of the movie. Tracy Lords is feeling this guy's crotch. It's the opening scene in a convertible. Yeah. She takes him to this club, which is in Abattoir. They go inside after.
It's literally in a meat locker.
It's like, this is weird, but this.
And there's a blink and you'll miss it thing. I think there's a human corpse go by.
Well, he sees something. He's like, "What was that?" Yeah, and we don't get a good look at it. And he's like a bit, but he doesn't care. He's like hanging out with Tracy Lords.
Yeah, Tracy Lords wants his heat-seeking missile.
She speaks some strange foreign language to the doorman, and he's got an interesting Euro look about him, and he lets him in. And they
perfect.
Then
what is it with vampires and the Euro look?
Yeah, there's way more of that in this movie coming up. So they go into this nightclub, this absolutely jam-packed, banging nightclub with the DJ, and he's trying to dance with these girls. They're like pushing him away.
They just keep shoving him away. He's a bit discomforted, but he's not giving up. He's gung ho.
He's like, well, he's probably already on something.
I love it. He's mic'd up and he's gone, woo!
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it gets very sinister very quick. So if it's a bit, there's an undercurrent of unease because no one's interacting with him, and in fact they shove him away and they're contemptuous of him, and he's getting a little bit.
That's actually a really key thing. Is they're not even like, ooh, I want to feed on this human that's here. They're like, humans, junk, get away. And we don't know that quite yet.
And then of course I just love this.
So he feels some drips of something on his hand.
You see,
they're red drops.
It's really well acted. Like,
them.
he's touching his forehead, he's looking at his hands. You're right, he tastes it, and then, oh man, we cut to the DJ, and then he sees, we see it's blood. He sees it's blood.
Yeah.
We cut to the DJ. The DJ spreads his arms wide. Behind him is lit up. It's a banner that says Bloodbath.
Yeah.
And then the sprinklers open, and down comes the blood.
They pump blood all over them, and they're absolutely covered. All these actors are absolutely covered in red.
Yeah.
And then finally they start beating up this guy. Maybe they start feeding on him?
Well, they just start, they're messing with him, right? They don't feed on him yet, but they're just beating him up. Yeah. As you said, they're utterly contemptuous of him. And he's crawling for his life, essentially. And then
he crawls to these boots,
these pristine black leather boots that don't have any blood on them.
Yeah.
Someone that's just arrived. Yeah. Now, I want to pause for a moment.
Okay.
Because I read an article online in Entertainment Weekly Online. It was called The Blade Oral History.
Okay.
Wesley Snipes and the cast look back at a modern cult classic. And they had a whole section on the blood raid. So, according to the production designer, we searched for a location forever, and we ended up finding a rundown meat packing factory, where they'd come in and slaughter animals, literally. There was a lot of white tile, and we aged it up a bit, gave it some cool lighting, and then we basically rigged the entire set like you would a modern-day sprinkler system. Mm-hmm. Wesley Snipes said, the extras, they had to actually sit around in the blood stuff.
Yeah.
Especially if you're one of those that rushed and raised your hand and said, I'll be at the front, take me. He said it was a tough gig. They couldn't change during lunch. They couldn't wipe it off for continuity. I applaud them. Thank you all so much. He said, and some people actually couldn't take it and quit.
Right.
Even though it's not real blood, it's corn syrup. But some people couldn't take it and quit. And someone here said, just before the film came out, one of the extras sued New Line because he got a skin disease.
Whoa!
This is the cinematographer.
Okay.
The cinematographer saying this, not the extra. Yeah. Cinematographer said, just before the film came out, one of the extras sued New Line because he got a skin disease, he said. Of course it's not true, otherwise I would be dead by now. Yeah. So obviously he got a lot of corn syrup on him as well.
Yeah.
Blade arrives. Great
pan up. We get to see Blade. He's just got such a great look. He's got a very Wild West kind of thing where he pulls his trench coat aside to reveal not a 6-shooter, but all his weapons. And he does that a couple times in this movie, and it's great. It's every time.
And these vampires who were so contemptuous and riding high in their blood
They're like,
fountain.
it's him!
Now they're freaking out.
Yeah.
They're scared.
Yeah.
Some great visual storytelling.
Yeah.
They're whispering one, so they're all crouched over.
Yeah,
they're
and they start
frightened.
backing up. The house lights come up, of course. And Blade starts doing kung fu on them, and aikido and various other martial arts, and just starts to train. And we get the dusting, which I think Buffy was a year before this, maybe, and maybe Buffy started doing the dusting, which is a very convenient way to get rid of vampire bodies.
To ash.
They just turn to ash, so there's no corpses to worry about, which they do have to worry about in the Tomb of Dracula comics, I guess, because there's bodies lying around most of the time.
Yeah, but when you kill a vampire, it turns to ash and disappears. Very nice and clean.
Yeah.
It's not a great effect by modern standards, but it's fine. It's fine. It didn't really take me out.
No, I think, you know what, I think that for a medium budget 1998 movie, the CG was okay.
I agree.
It was fine. I think there was a few bits in there which we'll talk to later on.
I watched a review by the Red Letter Media crew as prep for this, and they are scathing about the CGI, but I don't see it. I think it's perfectly fine. It doesn't take me out.
I think I've seen much worse 98 CGI, for sure. In fact, there's some of it here when we get some of the computer screen stuff, which looks very 1998, and it's like, okay. So it's surprising how good the other stuff looks compared to what was on that computer screen.
Yes. So he just destroys all these vampires.
Yeah. There's one guy that he burned, this guy named Quinn.
Yes.
Who he burns up. And then he starts to walk away, so it's not really clear if he was left Quinn he was going to leave him alive or trying to actually kill him, because later on Quinn comes back and it's like each time it's like Quinn's a thorn in his side, and he seems to be trying to kill him, but I don't know why let him live in this first scene. There's an interruption by the police, but that seems to be after he's already walking away from the burning body.
Yes. He just needs to survive because he's in the film later, basically.
Yes.
And Wesley Snipes delivers these lines like, "I'm getting tired of cutting bits off you, Quinn. Maybe I'll try something a little different this time. How about fire?"
Yeah. So he lights him on fire, and then starts to walk away.
And then he goes to the hospital later to kill him.
Yeah, he goes to the hospital later to kill him.
You're right, it's a bit silly.
Why didn't... Well, so it seems like he should have been interrupted by the cops from killing him at the scene, but I don't think that's the way it plays, unless I'm misremembering.
No, if that's not what happens. He lights him up and walks away from him, and then the human from the first scene scuttles out.
Yeah.
Blade grabs him, getting ready to kill him, presumably, but checks his neck.
Yeah.
He's not a vampire. Some more great visual storytelling. Yeah. It's later revealed that Blade can smell vampires, but whatever.
That does not add up based on that girl that tricks him in the...
So,
okay.
It's not perfect, but there you go.
He might have just been saying it as an insult. You can smell vampires.
Oh, good point.
I don't think it could be literal, because later on in the movie, this little girl, cowering little girl, tricks him because she's actually a vampire.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. So, and then some cops and firefighters come in. Among them, apparently, Stan Lee.
Oh, I missed that.
No, cut. It was cut.
Oh, okay.
So in the original, he was supposed to have a cameo.
Oh, okay.
Oh, jeez, this guy's on fire. Oh, man. Excelsior. But they cut it. And damn good thing, too, because this film is really good without any hints that it's comic book.
Yeah. So the corpse of Quinn reawakens at the morgue. But
just before we move on, I want to mention something. When I went and saw this in the cinemas, I was really, really loving it.
Yeah.
And then Blade does a fist pump.
Okay.
After he kills someone. And I remember just the enthusiasm draining out of me. Because he was so cool.
Okay.
And so focused.
Okay.
And then he kind of does a goofy...
I don't remember that.
And pumps his fist. It's just there. And I remember really... what a shame.
Huh.
When I saw it at the time.
Okay.
But, you know...
I didn't even notice it last night.
No, it's not that... I don't think it's that big a deal. But if you'd asked me what I remembered... One of the things I remembered most from the first scene in Blade, that's what I would have said.
So it's in that scene where he burns Quinn?
Just before it.
Just before.
So I think he's just killed maybe Tracy Lords.
Well, I think it's actually... Again, I love his glee. I love when he smiles
so you
when he
like
kills
that.
people. And maybe I saw the fist bump and was like, cool. I like it because he's into it.
Yeah. It's like that big grin he does when he catches his batarang.
Yeah.
It's after it's gone around and decapitated 5 zombies, he flashes this.
Yeah.
And this is the image of choice.
Yeah.
When people are writing an article about Blade on the internet, they will have this still.
Yeah.
As their promotional picture of his pearly whites, holding his I don't even know how you do, it's like a boomerang kind of kind of apparatus.
So we get to the morgue where there's this doctor is there. So the corpse comes alive and attacks this doctor who's
His name is Webb. Chris Webb, I think.
Okay, but
Curtis Webb.
I'm thinking of our main actress.
Oh, Karen.
Female lead, Karen. Yeah. So she's like what is she? She's a
hematologist.
Hematologist. That's right. So she's injured, and Blade is about to leave her, but then as he looks at her, he flashes back to his mother's face.
Yes. Now, I understand what you're saying. How could he know his mother's face?
I know how he can know his mother's face. He has vampire powers. He has vampire memory. Super vampire memory. It allows him to remember what is...
I had a different interpretation.
Okay.
For me, I thought it was his conscience.
Okay.
So, for me, it's... This woman could be like my mother. I should rescue her the way my mother wasn't rescued.
Okay.
That's what I took out of it. Because it's the only time it's the only time in the film that something like this happens. We don't get any other... It's almost a frame.
When he sees... When we learn later in the movie, spoiler, she's alive.
His mother, yeah.
His mother's alive.
Twist that is.
And his name, she calls him Eric. So she died before she named him, but she knows his name is Eric? How does this work?
Maybe she had already named him.
Okay, so she named him before he was born.
Some people do that, Kumar.
Yes, they do. Okay. No, I'm just trying to create the line. So she named him before he was born. She died.
Yeah, and he was a street kid.
He is born. And and then he remembers her face. Okay,
you're right. It really doesn't make sense because he was a street kid for the first 13 years of his life, or was he? No, Whistler found him when he entered puberty. That's when his vampire powers awakened.
So that actress's name, the mother, her name is Sanaa Lathan. I wrote it down because I was like, what have I seen her in?
Yes.
And it was driving me crazy.
Yes.
She is the final girl in AVP, Aliens vs. Predator. So if you want to count that, as a comic movie, it is on the cheat list.
That's on our cheat list. Yeah.
Then she is in that, and she's actually good in that dumb movie.
Wow.
She's very good in that dumb movie, and she's very good in this movie. And the other actress, in Boucher Wright, in this movie, who hasn't been in much else that I could find, is great. I really loved her in this. The Doctor. I thought she was awesome.
Karen, the hematologist.
Yeah.
All right, I just want to briefly mention before we move on, as Blade is rescuing Karen, some cops run in. These cops are very trigger happy.
Oh, yeah.
Blade is literally holding a woman.
Yeah.
They're shooting like mad. Whatever, maybe the cops are on the take in this film. They're owned by vampires. Maybe they're already there to clean up witnesses. That's why they're so trigger happy. But hilariously...
Well, his line is the best. It's really one of the great lines in cinema history.
You want to do it?
Well, I don't know if I can do it exactly, but it's, are you out of your motherfucking mind? Is I believe what he says. And it's almost...
And he doesn't say it in his Blade voice. He goes street. Right?
I almost wish that we hadn't had the scene with Quinn first, because this could have been his first line of dialogue in the movie. It would have been even better if that was the case. But anyway, he rescues her. He takes her back to his hideout, where we meet his mentor.
We gotta talk more about the line.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay.
The cops shoot him.
Yeah.
He's wearing a bulletproof vest. His leather armor includes a bulletproof vest. He just gets shot about 3 or 4 times in the chest. And then, for the first and only time in the film, his tone rises above the gravelly tone, which he uses for every line. And it goes...
I don't think it's gravelly for every line, but okay.
And it jumps up 3 octaves.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Motherfucker, you out of your damn mind?"
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like Rudy Ray Moore or something.
Yeah.
In Dolomite.
Yeah.
The bitch, are you for real?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so then they drive back to his hideout where we meet Abraham Whistler.
Kris Kristofferson.
Kris Kristofferson.
Who is still alive, by the way.
Yeah, in more ways than one, as we shall discuss.
Whoa, that's... What?
Because,
I hope he's not a real vampire. Anyway, go on. This is a great scene, by the way.
By the way, Blade drives an awesome Dodge Charger in this movie.
Yeah.
Which is so
the Blade
cool.
Mobile is brilliant.
Yeah. It's really, you know what the best feature of it is? Is that he can have his sword strapped on his back and still sit down in the driver's seat. I was like, wow, that's a special feature in that car that allows him to do that.
Well, he has all the best gear because Kris Kristofferson makes it for him and he uses it.
Yes. This is a bit like the mentor we got in Vampire Tales, the comic book. Yeah. But they've changed the name and he's not a black dude, he's Kris Kristofferson.
He's pretty he is a bit like the character in Vampire Tales, but he's more or less an original character.
Yes, and he builds weapons for him and stuff. As I said before, he makes the weapons. I use them.
This scene, incidentally, just some great dialogue to establish vampire facts. There's quite a lot of dialogue in this film that's really terse and information packed.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of great world building without a lot of info dumps.
Yes.
So Kris Kristofferson's just like, she's been bitten.
Yeah.
You know. And then he says to her, I'm going to inject you with essence of garlic. It's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And then he says to Blade, I'll give her 50-50.
If she
turns, you kill her, or I will.
I give her 50-50 if she's alive tomorrow. Which means 50-50 she might turn or not turn if she survives the night.
Well, if you turn, it's a bit vague exactly what vampirism is in this film, which is fine. I don't think you don't need a lot of less is more, right? Yeah. Is it supernatural? Is it mundane? It seems both.
Well,
fine.
Okay, I want to talk about this a little bit. Let's
talk about it now?
Before we say fine, yes.
Okay.
Because one of the things I don't like, and I think it's in this movie too, is when they have scientific ways to beat vampires. When they talk about UV, we'll make a UV light. They did this in Buffy as well.
Right.
Or where you can just put on sunscreen and go out. That's the thing they did in Buffy. I don't like it when you come up with scientific things and, you can inject this serum and that will cure, it's a blood disease that we can cure or something like that. I prefer it when it's a supernatural thing, because as soon as you go down the UV light hurts vampire, okay, well guess what? Moonlight is reflected sunlight. So what are we doing here? You're not making any sense. You're making it worse for yourself. Just say it's magic and leave it at that. And I think Blade, it leans into it in a way that is to its advantage, but it still was like, did we need this? What I did like was that there's a couple of lines where he says, where I think Blade and Whistler, or one or the other, just at least twice in the movie, say some of the stuff you hear, some of the legends are true, some are not. Crosses don't work, garlic does, silver does. And I like that stuff, and I was like, there was a certain moment where, they go out the vampires go out a couple of times into sunlight just by putting sunscreen on. And I'm like, wait a second, why not just write a line? Because in Bram Stoker's Dracula goes around in daytime, he just doesn't have powers.
Yeah.
So why not just say that? Because you just need a 10-second of dialogue. There's another moment where Deacon Frost...
you can't have that.
I think you can.
No.
Why not? Because you're not having crosses. Why not just say they can walk inside? I'll tell you another scene.
Because it's all right. You can't do that in this film because Blade is special because he can walk around in the day.
Yes. Okay, that's exactly right. That is true. Look. Okay, there's another scene where Deacon Frost, Stephen Dorff as Deacon Frost, is sitting in this computer room trying to decrypt this data.
Yeah.
And he's sitting in front of a glass wall, and you see his reflection in the whole scene, through the whole scene. And I'm like, okay, did they think about this?
Well, vampires have reflections in this because it's...
Yes, that's the thing, is that I love that they had the line where Whistler said some of the stuff is true, some isn't.
Yeah.
And you get to the scene, we don't need an explanation. It's like, okay, they do have reflections in the world of this movie.
Yeah.
So you're right about the whole Daywalker thing is a big part of the plot, that they had to have these guys wear
I would have
sunscreen
preferred
when they
it.
went out,
even when I saw it, I thought, if they have access to this sunscreen, they don't have any weaknesses at all. Because he just looks like a regular dude.
Yeah.
He doesn't...
And he can use his powers, vampire powers.
It's a shame that they had that. And I think, I don't know, maybe he, when they kill Udo Kier, they're wearing like motorcycle leathers. They are very clearly protected from the sun.
Yeah.
But then a couple of scenes later, Deacon Frost is literally, his eyes are out. Did he put sunscreen on his eyeballs? Yeah. I remember just looking at his eyes and thinking, he didn't put sunscreen on his eyes.
Yeah.
On his retinas.
Yeah.
He is in big trouble. He's not even wearing sunnies. But, they wanted Stephen Dorff to act with his face out, so there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel, look, I'm a pedant just like you, but I feel like I like things to be just so, especially when the plot is concerned. But when it's just world building, I think sometimes less is more. Because there's clearly supernatural elements in this film.
There are, yes.
And yet there's also mundane explanations for things.
Yes.
Scientific explanations for things. And I don't think I think you can have both as long as it's left vague. And that it doesn't create plot holes.
I think I Am Legend is the only thing that does it exactly right. Because he talks about the Jewish vampires and stuff in there. Like, how would they feel about the crosses? He actually asks all those questions in that book.
Yeah.
I can't think of any
Richard
other...
Matheson.
vampire
but
thing.
But I Am Legend by Richard Matheson is pure science. There's no supernatural stuff in it.
Yes.
Whereas in this one, I mean, the denouement is supernatural.
Yeah.
Like, there's a ritual that creates crazy flying bone gargoyles that fly into Deacon Frost, and he becomes a blood god.
Yeah.
So what's going on? I mean, if there's a sliding scale of magic and mundanity, this is closer to the mundane end of the spectrum, but it's still a bit on the magic one.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it because because it's not interfering with kind of like the plot with the narrative.
Yes.
I understand. I really want things to be consistent.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
But I give it a pass because it's mysterious. There's a mystery.
Yes.
Science has some of the answers, but not all.
Also, this movie has a new mythology, which we're getting to in the next scene with the Council. We get this Council of Vampires, which is a thing that I feel like, I don't know if this is the first to do it, but it's been done again. Like True Blood had this kind of Council of Vampires.
Yep.
I feel like it's done since. I don't know if it was done before. Udo Kier, All-Star Udo Kier.
Udo Kier is now tied as the comic book movie Oblivion All-Star. This is his third.
Yeah.
So along with Timothy Dalton, he is now tied as appearing in the most comic book movie Oblivion films.
Yeah. So he's like the head of this council. So they are like pure born vampires. Somehow they're born as vampires.
Yes.
We don't get any explanation. Some vampires are born, others are turned. So there's a bit of Stephen Dorff as Deacon Frost is one of these turned vampires, and there's a conflict. At least Frost is creating this conflict where
they're contemptuous of him.
Yes, they consider him lesser because he's turned. He's like, why? And he's like, humans, we should be ruling them. Why are you hiding in the shadows?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, this is the ancient way. We've been doing it for 1,000 years.
This is a great bit of world building. So there's a vampire aristocracy.
Yes.
Where if you were born a vampire, you are better than a person who was turned into one.
Yes.
And Deacon Frost he has an inferiority complex about this. Like, he really bridles whenever anyone talks about his blood not being pure and how he will never be on the council, you will never rule us because your blood's not pure. And even Karen the hematologist gets into it. She's winding him up by saying, I see you've got a scar on your forehead. Yeah, you must have got that. If you were a real vampire, you'd have healed that instantly. But you must have got that scar before your turn. And he's like smoking his cigarette. He's smoking it down to the filter. He's getting really wound up. It's really great.
So he's being too conspicuous. He's the one it's his nightclub. He's the one running these raves.
Well, he's a revolutionary.
Yeah, and so that actually now it adds up that why the people at the rave, which are his kind of people, were contemptuous of the human in there instead of just immediately feeding on him or worrying that they were discovered by a human or something like that. Yes. So we've got this kind of conflict between these two forces.
Yeah, so Frost he wants... The purebloods are happy with the situation. They're running a version of The Masquerade from Vampire the Masquerade. The White Wolf role-playing game. Which is a grand scheme to keep vampires secret from the humans. They have alliances with human politicians. They have an agreement with them not to congregate in numbers. The pureblood vampires of the council say to Frost, we cannot congregate in numbers, we cannot reveal ourselves. If we do, the human politicians will make our lives very difficult. And Frost is just utterly contemptuous of this argument because he is compensating for being a half-blood. Mm-hmm. He thinks that vampires should rule the humans. It's ridiculous that they skulk in the shadows. But the vampires, on the other hand, they own everything. So this is the hidden war again, the secret world. The vampires own everything, right? They own all real estate. They own politicians. They own the cops. They have their marks on people's necks.
Yes, they're familiars. They're human familiars. Yes. Yeah.
This is property. No other vampire can drain him without being accountable to his master.
Yeah.
But they're passive, right?
Yes.
Whereas Frost is he wants to overturn the status quo. So he's in there translating that dead language in that
sequence. Yeah, so they've got this vampire Bible called the Erebus or something, which he's trying to translate, and Udo Kier is like, it's not translatable.
You can't translate this.
Even if you could, you wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
But he's just running it through a 1998 computer, basically, and we get some really kind of goofball Lawnmower Man 2 kind of graphics out of it, but that's fine.
It's not too bad. I mean, it's clear what's going on.
It was set in 1998. It's not set in the future, so that's fine.
It's clear what's going on. I mean, you're not in any doubt about what's going on. The little squares appear. It enhances a glyph. The translation is running down the right-hand side.
Yes. What is a bit crazy is when it assembles the whole temple room as a kind of rotating 3D graphic, and I'm like, how did this computer do this exactly?
Did the text do that?
Yeah, how'd they figure this out? So there's some vampire legend about something called La Magra, which is like a blood god of some sort. So he's trying to resurrect this thing. That's his line. Meanwhile, Blade sends Karen home after she's been bitten. But it's like a ploy. He's trying to lure the familiar out, and the familiar does. Shows up as a cop at her door. Yep. He gets in a fight with the cop. He, in an amazing scene, in broad daylight in New York City, the black man beats the crap out of a white cop while he's carrying a sword on his back. Yeah. White cop runs away. He pulls a gun on the guy. Nobody stops Blade. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Yeah. It was just like, why isn't anybody doing anything? Doesn't matter.
They stake out the car, which he runs away from. It has blood in the back seat. Because this Officer Krieger, his name, is making...
not blood stains, actual blood from a blood bag.
Right. Blood.
Yeah. Vial, like bags of blood.
Yes. In like an esky.
Which is like, well, why? Oh, my question was, like, why did he stop to kill Karen on his way to delivering the blood? Like, do one mission at a time.
That's a good point. That didn't occur to me.
But anyway.
But he's trying to save time.
Yeah.
So... maybe this is a duty he resents because it turns out he's delivering blood to a really disgusting obese vampire. Yeah. But we'll get to that. He goes back to his car after Blade stakes it out for about 10 hours. He gets in, he drives. We have some more of this fast-forwarded...
really interesting fast-forward.
Yeah, you don't see it a lot. It's pretty good. It's effective. And we arrive at another grimy industrial area, and Blade gets out. He points out to Karen, he's a vampire. That's a vampire. That whore on the corner there is a vampire. She's like, how do you know?
The way they move.
I can smell... Oh, yeah, he says, the way they move. The way they carry themselves. Also, I can smell it.
Yes.
But maybe he can or maybe he can't.
Yeah.
But he knows what to look for. He knows the tells.
Yes.
So they enter this...
This weird Japanese, like...
It's so weird.
It's so fun. I love it. I really love it.
They are... These vampires...
With a weird kind of idol band in like schoolgirl uniforms performing on stage.
This is the theme of the vampires, especially Frost's vampires, which is that they are utterly decadent. Yeah. Their evil is not just in that they drink blood and prey on human beings, but that they lead revolting hedonistic lifestyles where no vice is too depraved. Yeah. You know, we've got schoolgirls singing in an underground club. They're having sex constantly.
I feel like the Japanese thing was... I seem to recall an interview at the time where Wesley Snipes said it was his idea to
I wouldn't be surprised. So many things in this are Wesley Snipes' idea.
It's because he was in that Michael Crichton movie, Rising Sun.
Oh, he was too.
With Sean Connery, which is apparently really racist. I haven't seen it. But
it is.
Maybe it gave him a taste of Japanophilia at the time.
And he's got... we know he likes Hong Kong movies and martial arts. Yeah. Maybe he's a bit of an Orientalist.
Maybe, yeah. But I dig this so much.
Yeah, well, I mean, the message is plain. Like, these guys are filthy fetishists. Yeah. They're revolting. Yeah. Revolting, vice-riddled monsters. You know, they're always smoking. Yeah. They're always having public sex. Not to mention the fantastic blood rave at the start. What could be more decadent than pumping human blood through a sprinkler system? It really kind of hammers home how evil... Like, why are vampires evil? We don't really know. I think in Buffy, you died and you were possessed by an evil demon.
Well, I would say the morality of Buffy is... I have a lot of questions about it.
Well, it's not
I don't think it's consistent.
Maybe it's like the crossed virus from Garth Ennis's Crossed. Maybe when you contract vampirism, neurochemical changes occur that unleash all your worst instincts and you become scum.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not really explained. But everyone treats vampirism like a fate worse than death.
Yes. But they tell Karen to kill herself.
But Blade himself is kind of a vampire.
He is, yeah.
And a good one. And he takes a serum to suppress his bloodlust.
I think vampire do that? Okay, so I guess the evil thing is that eventually they attack innocent humans and drink their blood when the thirst gets so strong that they can't control themselves.
Yeah, and Blade was preying on human beings.
And he still feels guilt about the people he preyed on when he was 13.
Sure. Yeah.
Because he didn't turn until puberty.
Yeah.
That's when, he didn't get the thirst until puberty.
I think it's fine, but I was asking that. I was asking why, if it's a virus and not a supernatural curse per se,
Yeah.
why are they irredeemably evil?
Yeah.
So here we go. I'm on Team Kumar here. I want to know the answer.
What would happen with Karen if she turned? Would she become evil or something? I don't know.
Why can't she just take the serum?
Good question.
It works for Blade.
Yeah.
Wouldn't she just be herself, but with a need to... And why is it... I mean, how evil is it to eat people exactly? You could be like Morbius, the living vampire, and just eat crooks.
Yes.
Incidentally, did you know that Morbius has a cameo in this film?
Was supposed to be in the film. It was cut from the end.
It was cut.
Yeah. Alternate ending. So they find so they meet this vampire Pearl, this grotesquely like Jabba the Hutt type vampire, and Pearl reveals that Deacon Frost is trying to summon the Blood God. By the way, Deacon Frost in the comics was the old dude that killed Blade's mother.
Yes, and now he's the young dude.
Now he's a super young dude. Well,
he's old, but he's a vampire, so he doesn't age.
That's right, he doesn't age. There's a line about aging in here somewhere too, about how they age.
Yes, vampires don't age at all,
but Blade
does, but slowly.
Slowly, okay. Probably true considering how Wesley Snipes looks today.
He's pretty well preserved.
So then we get the meeting in the open air. So Udo Kier is killed, and Deacon Frost confronts Blade in the daytime. Very interesting line of dialogue here where he accuses him of being an Uncle Tom. That's the only mention of Blade's race, I think, in any way, in any even kind of
I would say so.
from the side. It's really interesting because I'm surprised how obscure this character was. There must have been studio pressure to whitewash it.
There absolutely was. In the aforementioned interview I read, the oral history, Goyer mentions that they asked if he could be white.
Yeah.
And obviously
not
he said,
surprised.
No.
Yeah. And in '98, it probably could have happened.
They also were pushing for it.
And people wouldn't have known.
Yeah. And exactly.
And people wouldn't complain.
No one would have known. No one would have cared.
Yeah.
Except for, exactly. But what an error that would have been. What a terrible error, because it's... apparently the studio also wanted it to be a comedy.
Right.
And...
Okay.
And it seems... And luckily, Goyer and Snipes just said... No way. They pushed really hard.
Bizarre. Studio notes are so bizarre.
Yeah. Well, nobody... It's like you say, what could... Okay, Blade is a great film.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine it could have been different. But it's like you said, what is Blade in 1997?
Yeah. Yes.
A very camp kind of character in a 70s comic. An edgy, creepy... a sleazy edgelord in the 90s.
Yeah.
They could have made him anything, and that would be Blade forever.
Yeah.
And we're lucky that we got Wesley Snipes being awesome.
Yes. Okay, so they developed this. Karen develops a serum which causes vampires to explode.
It's an anticoagulant. And it reacts explosively with vampire blood.
Yeah, and she's also trying to cure. She's got a cure for vampirism, which she uses on herself, and she offers to Blade. He hasn't taken it yet.
And he's tempted.
He is tempted. So there's this giant temple.
Right.
Where they're going to have this ceremony to summon the Blood God.
Alright, so the Blood God is called La Magra, which is consistently referred to as him.
Okay.
But La Magra, that's the feminine.
Yeah.
It means, I looked it up, the skinny one.
Okay.
Or the skinny female one.
Okay.
or like the lean, kind of like, almost like the hungry one. Which is actually a pretty good name for your Blood God, I think.
Yes, I guess so.
It's pretty groovy. Now, this temple, as you say, the dialogue heavily implies that the temple was there all along.
For hundreds or thousands of years. This is what I was getting to. Why is it in New York? Yeah. I guess there were Cherokee vampires maybe 1,000 years ago. I don't know what the point... That was so weird.
Yeah, it's really dumb. I think, I wanted to go back and watch it again because it occurred to me that he probably rebuilt the temple because it looks so modern. And there's stainless steel running all through it. The Blade's blood is collected in what looks like a stainless steel basin.
Yeah.
Is there a chance that he was talking about the lost secret of the temple as a machine to summon La Magra?
Okay.
And not necessarily that the temple was literally under whatever this city is, some eastern seaboard American city. I didn't get a chance to go back and look. But is there a chance that he's talking about the lost knowledge?
I think it was clear to me that he was talking about the temple.
Well, that's long.
Because it stuck out in my mind.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah, so they start. So Blade is captured as they're raiding this place. They put him into the device to drain his blood because they need Daywalker blood. They need a half human, half vampire as part of the ceremony to summon La Magra. Now we get these bat skeletons which appear out of... Now this was the thing that to me has a very 80s vibe about it.
Right.
For some reason, I don't know, maybe that was the kind of thing...
Did it remind you of Bat Out of Hell?
Raiders of the Lost Ark, maybe? Something about, you know, the...
Oh, yeah.
It looks a bit weird. This is the one kind of bit of CG that I was like, well, okay. Fortunately, we don't focus on it too long. These bat skeleton ghosts fly into Deacon Frost as the ceremony is performed. There's a great bit where Quinn has taken Blade's sunglasses. So Blade, when he escapes, goes through this elaborate thing to kill Quinn and catches his sunglasses midair, much like Ash in Army of Darkness gets his chainsaw back. Great moment. So Frost turns into this unkillable blood god, which he cuts him in half, and then he merges back to... He cuts off his arm.
Is he a blood god? I feel like he's just kind of a slightly tougher vampire.
Yes, but I guess that is... What would a god be? Maybe that's what all it is. Maybe that all is...
Well, there's a story.
By the way, what is his plan? Do you remember what his plan was?
Well, he wants to turn everyone in the world into a vampire.
Great. Who are they going to eat?
Yeah, good question. A very good question. A question the filmmakers themselves answered.
Okay.
In a cut scene.
Ah, okay.
So that scene that you're referring to, this is the scene where she winds him up about being a half-breed.
Yeah.
And he's smoking his cigarette down to the filter angrily. And he snaps and says, I'll tell you what we are. I'm not a virus. I'm not a sexually transmitted disease. I'm the top of the food chain. And once we summon La Magra, everyone you ever loved, everyone you ever knew is going to be just like me. And the scene ends there, I think. But I watched a deleted scene. I watched a special feature from the DVD, which is on YouTube, where you can see this scene in its entirety.
Okay.
She then cuts it. Her very next remark is, oh yeah, everyone I love and know is going to be a vampire. What's everybody going to eat? And he goes, follow me. He takes her to a fridge in the wall. He opens it. Okay. And this is an obvious cut because it looks really goofy. Inside there are some guys that look kind of like mummies.
Okay.
They're hanging from the ceiling and they look asleep. They're bandaged up like, you know, they're just bandaged, they're mummified, all bandaged up. Just with regular bandages. Not even science fiction bandages, but just kind of regular cloth bandages. And he goes, here you go. I can keep them alive for years. And they produce 10 to 15 pints of blood a day. And I think, judging from what I saw in this short clip, the scene at the start where that guy walking around in the meat locker sees a suspicious body in a plastic bag, that was supposed to be foreshadowing to this moment. That he's going to industrially farm the human beings that he doesn't turn into vampires.
So this is similar to The Matrix again, in which they are using humans as batteries instead of cows, which they wouldn't have to give dreams to keep them happy. It's just Matrix. It's another dumb thing that got...
Or just lobotomize people, you know? Yeah, it was kind of an obvious cut because it's really weak, but it leaves a big plot hole.
Yeah.
Or does it? Deacon Frost is just a nutbag.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
He hasn't thought this plan through.
Yeah,
He's so desperate to rule the vampires and overthrow the council, which is discriminating against him because he's a turned vampire and not a born vampire.
By the way, we have to mention at this stage that the hideout, Blade's hideout, was raided and Whistler was killed.
Yes.
He comes back in the second movie, I think with no explanation, is my memory.
The explanation is that he was turned and he didn't kill himself in time.
Oh, so he is a vampire in the second one. Yeah. I don't remember that.
Incidentally, yes, because it doesn't make sense, because he clearly killed himself.
Right, and we learned that Blade's mother is alive around this time. Once he gets...
I should say that in the third film, Blade Trinity, they bring back this idea of the industrial farming of human beings. So that's a main theme of the third movie.
Oh.
So they didn't forget it. They brought it... Goyer brought it back.
I wonder if they... So does the scene that was cut contradict what happens in the third one? Do you remember?
No.
Okay.
I haven't even seen the third one. I only know this from reading about the plot holes.
Yeah. I wonder if it's so remember in Alien, there's a scene that was cut where... It's in the director's cut where...
I don't want to talk about that.
She finds that people thought were dead were alive, and they're maybe being mutated into eggs.
That scene is awful. What a great... Yeah. You can't have that in there. It contradicts everything that happens in Aliens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It only... Yes. If you cut... The later movies only work because that scene was cut. If you leave it in, it causes a contradiction.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So I don't think that's the case here.
Okay.
Just that Frost is...
So Frost, I'm going to say he is a god, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because he gets his arm cut off, and he gets cut in half at the waist,
Yeah.
but he fuses back together,
Yeah.
and his clothes also fuse back together. And
wow.
only a god could do that.
He's a reality
not just
manipulator.
a super vampire.
Well, speaking of deleted scenes, Frost was originally supposed to turn into a Shub Niggurath style Lovecraftian horror
Oh, okay.
made of blood. And you can actually see the rushes for it.
Okay.
So the early CGI kind of like test
So they did
footage.
CGI tests, okay.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see.
Yeah.
I'll put it on the Facebook page. So, and he turns sort of into a big blood whirlwind.
Mm-hmm.
It looks awful.
Okay.
And he's sort of in the center of it.
Mm.
And that whole space. So once again, why was that temple so tall?
Yeah.
You know, why not just the temple? The temple is about 5 stories tall.
It's because of
It's
magic.
that- yeah,
It's because the blood needs to fall a certain amount. It has to be drained a certain number of meters before...
No, Kumar, it's because it's filled up with a blood tornado in the original ending.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And what they did was they showed it to a test audience, and the test audience hated it.
Okay.
They said, first of all, this looks like shit.
Yeah.
Second of all, Deacon Frost was a great evil villain, and as soon as he disappeared and turned into a blood tornado, I was checked out of them. And the guys, like the producers, were already reluctant about this blood
Right.
thing, and this was the push.
Sounds like the Van Helsing movie with Hugh Jackman, speaking of Dracula and Van
Yeah.
Helsing, where you have 2 CGI monsters fighting each other at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is like a sky beam, except made of blood.
Yeah.
Blade fights a sky beam. If we're talking about precursor to the MCU, Blade fights a blood tornado / sky beam at the original ending of Blade. So an obvious cut, and they replaced it with slightly more indestructible vampire than usual,
Yeah.
who is still nonetheless defeated by the anticoagulant
Yeah,
serum.
he just hits him with like 10 of these things, which is enough to...
Incidentally, I think I've said enough about the storytelling, the setups and payoffs in this. Before the ritual even begins, there's a great scene. Blade is struggling because he's exhausted his serum and he needs blood. He's at the mercy of Quinn and Frost and the minions. They find the anticoagulant, which has already killed 2 vampires gruesomely. They turn into giant, boils and explode.
Yeah.
He's got it, and he says, this must be your favourite serum, your famous serum. And this, incidentally, is just after Frost has bragged about knowing everything about Blade. Because Blade's... I just love this. Blade's sword is booby-trapped.
Yeah.
If you grasp it by the handle, it releases some blades.
Mini blades.
Mini blades that cut your hand off, unless you flip a switch that stops the clockwork mechanism from deploying. Frost picks up the sword, and you're watching, and Blade's watching. We're all watching. Our gaze is directed at the hilt of the sword, and we're waiting for it to pop open and destroy Deacon Frost's hand. And at the last second, he thumbs it closed.
Yeah.
And he says, "Didn't I tell you I know everything about you?" Because as we have discovered, Blade's mother is alive, and Deacon Frost is the vampire that turned her, and she's been his lover these last 30 years.
She comes on to Blade 2 in a couple of scenes here, which are wild.
Yeah, really.
She's
crazy.
really almost making out with him.
Really hammers home the decadence of what vampirism does to you. It turns you into an incestuous monster. Then, right after he's demonstrated that, right after he's bragged that he knows everything about Blade, he picks up the anticoagulant poison and says, "This must be your famous serum." And he's completely wrong.
Yeah.
And Blade says, "Why don't you try it?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "Sorry, I prefer the real thing." And he throws it away behind him, where it wedges in a crack. And then later on, when Blade is fighting...
Well, we don't see it wedge in the crack. We just see it go over into the pit. And we're like, you assume... You would think it would shatter, but no, it doesn't shatter. It's later in the movie we see it's wedged in the crack. Yeah.
And Blade even looks at it, and Frost... This is in the middle of their final battle. Blade even looks at it, and we look at it.
What's good about it is that you don't see it wedged in the crack, because if you had, it would have been really obvious.
Right, gotcha.
That's going to come back into play later.
Gotcha.
Instead, it's just like, you're not going to be able to kill me with that thing that you already used. Yeah.
Yeah, Frost looks up and says,
good.
"Your serum can't help you now."
Yeah.
And it is, and then he throws his sword at it and misses. Frost laughs, but then the anti-theft device deploys, cracks the stone, the serum falls down into Blade's hand, and he uses it to kill Frost. So Frost, despite being a god, is not immune to the power of modern science.
Yeah, he's only like a 10 times vampire.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
10 times anticoagulant is going to kill him. I
And
guess.
precisely, it does. It
Yeah.
does.
So they go up to they leave, Karen and Blade go up to the roof, and she's like, okay, you want to take the serum, the cure? He's like, no, I got more work to do, because he will lose his vampiric strength and stuff.
You want to help me fight? You want to help me make a better serum?
Yeah, to stop the bloodthirst. And then we get a scene set later in Moscow.
Yep.
Where a vampire is about to feed on a woman. He's bringing her to a
mirrors
club, and you see the
glyph.
You see the glyph over the door, which I just love.
Well, and it mirrors the first scene, except
Yes.
now it's a male vampire instead of a female
Yeah.
one, seducing a woman instead of a man.
And he's interrupted by Blade standing in the snow with
Otherwise,
his
it's
black
exactly the
leather.
same. Although we don't get into the club, he attacks her in the street. But,
Yeah.
it says the same thing. It's a surprise. Where are we going? It's a surprise.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah,
it's the same word in Russian as it is in English.
yeah. And then Blade appears, just looks beautiful shot in
Yeah.
the white snow. So okay, I want to mention. The thing about this scene I love, especially loved watching in 2023 of this scene in Russia, was that it wasn't after the credits.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Another way in which this is not like an MCU.
Yeah, no, or not even after the initial credits or at the end. It's not like a mid-credit scene or an end-credit scene. It's just there at the end. And you could, yeah, so good. So I just want to mention a little bit about David S. Goyer and some of his credits.
Please.
Crow 2, City of Angels.
Yep.
Dark City, not related, but Blade, Blade 2, Blade 3, Batman Begins, Batman 2, and Batman 3, so Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises. He's got story credits on those.
Yes.
Ghost Rider 2, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman,
Yep.
and then Terminator, Dark Fate, and the new Hellraiser.
So this guy is nerd royalty.
He's nerd royalty. I think he's hit
Comic book movie Oblivion royalty.
Yes,
yeah.
I think he's hit and miss
Yeah.
royalty. I think some of this stuff is good, some of it's dreadful.
Yeah.
But again, he didn't have full writing credits on a lot of these. He just had a story credit and somebody else came in. And I wanted to... So we got to talk a little bit... Oh, Donal Logue, who played Quinn, is Harvey Bullock in the Gotham TV series.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Wow. He's great in this. And apparently his role was much smaller at the start.
Okay.
But he had such great chemistry with Stephen Dorff,
Okay.
who played Deacon Frost, that they just filled up a lot of screen
They
time
made
with
him the
them
main-
bantering with one another.
Yeah. There are some banter scenes that are just like in there that could have been cut for sure. I noticed one or two where they're really going back and forth, like kind of joking with each other almost.
Well, everyone thought that was really funny, so they've left it in and cut the scene that explained how the new world, where everyone was a vampire, was going to look.
Yeah. Stephen Norrington, the director,
Yes.
was attached to Ghost Rider.
Was he?
Lost out. Was attached to Shang-Chi in the early 2000s. That didn't happen. This was pre-MCU.
Yep.
Was attached to Akira.
Wow, really?
That would have been a whitewashed Akira, but him and the guy that wrote it were also the director and writer of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which did come out and failed, so Akira was apparently cancelled.
Yep.
And he was also attached to a remake of The Crow from just 5 or 6 years ago, which did not happen.
Stephen Norrington seems to be one of those directors that everyone has nothing but good things to say about. Kind of like an auteur.
Yeah.
He's only done 3 films, as far as I know.
Yes.
Death Machine, which is the film that got him Blade, which is kind of like a low-budget, B-grade sci-fi horror. Blade, which is obviously great. Very competent, great direction.
Yeah.
And then, of course, his second comic book movie, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, based on an Alan Moore comic, a perversion of an Alan Moore comic, arguably, which was a massive flop. Not only was it a flop, but he had a very unpleasant time making it.
Okay.
Apparently, especially interacting with Sean Connery.
Okay.
Both of whom have retired, essentially.
Yeah.
So after the failure of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Sean Connery retired from acting and hasn't acted since.
Yeah.
And, of course, has passed away.
Yeah.
Norrington announced that he would never make a film again.
Okay.
Has since retracted that statement, and yet, nonetheless, has not made another
But he's been attached to all these comic book movies.
He keeps getting attached to movies because, as I said, people have a lot of respect for him. Apparently, in this interview I mentioned, the oral history interviews, Stephen Dorff says he's a friend to this day and that he just does his own stuff. He said that at the moment he's shooting a movie in his own home with miniatures that he expects to be done in 10 or 20 years.
Okay.
So,
I just want to mention he did do a movie in 2001 between Blade and League called The Last Minute.
Oh, okay.
So it's a 2001 British-American urban gothic film. It's 104 minutes, so it's a feature film.
Okay, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah. Don't know anything about it.
He had originally an effects man.
Okay.
Worked under Stan Winston, famous effects who did the Rippers in Tank Girl.
Yeah.
And of course worked with comic book movie Oblivion bête noir David Fincher, who incidentally you may or may not be aware was attached as the director of Blade.
Was he?
For an entire year.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting. When did 7 come out? I'm wondering if this was after.
So if I can,
it's hard. I can't find the. 1995. So he would have been like a hot director.
Oh yeah. He wanted in, and they had to let him. So here I have a quote from one of the producers, whose surname is Frankfurt, but I haven't written down his first name.
Okay.
He says, I knew David Fincher from way before we were friends. He was finishing 7 at the time at New Line, and he read the script and was like, what's going on with Blade? This is pretty good. I just have some different ideas about it. Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. So I said, this is Frankfurt, David, look, I would love to have you direct this movie. You're my favourite director, but I know you're not going to do it.
Right.
And it says we were going into a meeting and he couldn't help himself. He started talking about the first act and what he wanted to do differently. And I could see everybody just completely mesmerised, and I knew right then we were going to waste a year, which was basically what happened.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So that's just nuts that David Fincher was more or less attached as the director of Blade.
Okay, so we have... Oh, yeah. So he's kind of semi-responsible for Blade in some degree and Barbed Wire.
Just like Udo Kier.
Yeah.
But having said that, it seems like David S. Goyer and Wesley Snipes were kind of the engines of getting this movie made.
Yeah.
David S. Goyer actually pitched it originally as a trilogy.
Okay.
He literally said that I'm going to pitch you the Star Wars of black vampire films.
Wow. I wonder how many Draculas there are. I think there might be 2 at least.
And once they'd asked him if he would consider a white Blade, and he said no. Apparently the New Line studio head said, I'll make it for $40 million if you get Denzel Washington, $35 if you get Wesley Snipes, and $20 if you get Lawrence Fishburne.
Wow. Well, if Blade is really supposed to be British, 20 years ago it's Idris Elba.
20 years ago, though.
15 years ago, when he was on The Wire, when was that? That was 10, 15 years ago. He would have been the right age, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, it's hard to see.
It's Wesley Snipes.
Wesley Snipes. This film can't exist without Wesley Snipes.
And then Mahershala Ali is an awesome actor, but he's
won 2 Academy Awards.
There was a TV series.
Yes.
As well with
there
was a rapper. I can't remember who it was, but I guess there were 13 episodes or something. Like I'm probably getting this all.
There was
a
TV series. It came out in 2011. I didn't write much down about it, but yes, there wasn't a rapper in the main role. Speaking of rappers. This film was sort of, it was kicking around since the early 90s. At one stage, New World Productions had the rights to it.
Roger Corman.
That's Roger Corman's studio. Yeah. And Roger Corman,
So...
yeah. So like the Fantastic Four.
I wonder if this is the same time as Fantastic Four.
Yeah, well it is, obviously.
If they were like, let's get this away from... I mean, you can't take the rights away once you've sold them, but... I imagine they must have been panicking, shitting their pants. Or maybe that's why they were like, well, that was Fantastic Four. Blade's going to be like that, so let's not give a shit about it.
But do you remember how I said, like, 1970s era Blade is like the vampire hunting Shaft?
Yes.
Roger Corman wanted to make a vampire western.
Okay.
Set in Mexico. This is long before Dusk Till Dawn.
Okay.
With Richard Roundtree as Blade.
Whoa! Holy moly, that would have been...
That would have been really something.
I want to see that one, too.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, man, that would have been really something. So, this film, in the end, cost $45 million to make. And made, as we said earlier, $131.2 million.
Wow.
Which was a big success in the late 1990s.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, are we... any more trivia?
Oh, yeah, heaps.
Yep.
Oh, my God. How much trivia do you want? I got pages. As we know, as you've mentioned, there was a TV series.
Yep.
Came out in 2011. Also...
2011?
I think so, yeah.
Thought it would have been. Okay, you might be right.
double check.
Yeah.
And also... or maybe it was the anime. Because an anime series by Madhouse came out. Perhaps that came out in 2011.
Yes. Blade the TV series was 13 episodes, 2006.
2006. Okay.
So pre-MCU.
It must be the anime that came out in 2011. Yeah. All right, so Marvel got the rights back in 2012, but never, as we've discussed, really did anything with it.
Right.
So there hasn't been any more Blade comics. An MCU Blade film was ruled out at first, but as you've mentioned, it's now in production, but it keeps getting delayed. It was supposed to come out this year, but it keeps changing directors. It's changed writers a couple of times.
Right.
And now the strikes have pushed it back even further, as it has done with various movies, he says as he reaches out to the bell. I wonder what I could be talking about.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Yes. And apparently at one stage, this is straight from Stephen Dorff, there was going to be a prequel movie about Deacon Frost.
Whoa.
$20 to $30 million budget, a gangster vampire movie set in New York City that, quote, would have been awesome.
Huh. Okay.
But he said there was so much drama between New Line and Marvel about who owned the rights.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Okay, let's do our votes.
Okay. So I guess we'll talk about maybe so we've got Tomb of Dracula issues 10, 12, and 13. A couple of issues of Vampire Tales.
Yeah, look, I think the Tomb of Dracula, that's a tentative yay. They're really fun to read.
Yeah.
Pretty fun to read. They're fairly obscure, and they are very repetitive.
Well, we say they're obscure, but no, I think this is a popular series, and people still go back to it.
Right.
I think it's like it's 70 issues, and people still love this, especially for Gene Colan's work.
Okay. I just find it, to me, it's really mind-boggling that there's a whole Marvel comic series about Dracula, and where the heroes are the descendants of various figures from the Dracula novel.
I will say that the current printings with the overbright colors are not the way Gene Colan's art is supposed to look. So if you can find the original issues somewhere online, or look for them.
Yep.
Okay.
The magazines are all right. You must absolutely avoid the 90s era one, like The Plague.
Yeah.
You will get The Plague if you read these comics. They're just awful.
Yeah.
The film.
Well, I'm going to say my yay for the comic.
Oh, right. I'd say yay for Tomb of Dracula.
For Tomb of Dracula, I do like the magazines too. I think the
magazines are pretty cool.
They're cool. There's some Chris Claremont dumbness in them. Like there's one scene where he figures out that this person that visited the club is a vampire because he looks at a photo that was taken and that person's not in the photo. But later on, they look at security tapes of vampires walking around. I'm like, this is the same issue, dude.
Come on, Chris Claremont.
Yeah. But Tomb of Dracula I think is pretty good. So it's a yay.
It's a yay for me for Tomb of Dracula.
And you can very easily get them in reruns.
They're cool. Yeah. I'm looking forward to reading some more in the near future.
Yes. Okay, so the movie, obviously we're both yay on this, I think. Right?
Yeah, obviously. This movie is really cool. I mean, it's 2 hours long, but it doesn't feel like it.
No.
It sets a cracking pace.
Yeah.
There's some great, dense storytelling with images.
Yeah.
With terse
martial arts
dialogue. Yeah. The action sequences are not overblown or too long.
Yeah.
There's some dodgy CGI, but it's just of the time. You can absolutely see past it.
By the way, another awesome thing about the movie is his poses.
Oh, yeah.
Like the one where he does the circle on the ground with the sword that was in the trailer, and there's another one where he also puts his sword down.
In the final after he's just dispatched like 30 vampires.
Something like that,
after he's juiced up from drinking Karen's blood.
Yes.
In a very kind of like erotic scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They leaned into that big time.
Big time. He dispatches a bunch of vampires, and then he just sort of does this really groovy flourish where he runs he twists his sword in the ground and strikes a pose. It's all really cool. Yeah. This film's fantastic. You mentioned your favorite line, which was what the hell do you think you're doing, motherfuckers?
Yeah.
Well, there's also a baffling line, which I also love, that appears at the very end of the film.
Okay.
Right when he dispatches Frost, which is, some motherfuckers are always trying to skate uphill.
Yes.
If you can explain this line to me, Kumar, you are a wiser man than I.
I did think about it too. I think he meant that Deacon Frost was trying to get above his station, like his ambition was too high.
So Blade subscribes to the vampire theory of caste.
Well, I think even a trueborn could not become a vampire god, is maybe what he was. I don't know. It was a funny line though.
Another ad lib.
Yeah.
So allegedly they were doing a script reading and Wesley Snipes said it, and apparently everyone else around the table, the producers, David Goyer, said, "Wow, what a great line! Let's put it in the film." Baffling. Adaptation.
I think this is not the Blade of the comics. Is he? Is he not? You out of your motherfucking minds is such a line. You out of your mother-loving minds could have been a Marv Wolfman line. You know what? I'm going to say no, because they've made him a half-vampire, which is a thing that the comic did not do. He had the immunity to vampire bites.
Yeah.
Tough call. I don't know. I don't think it's like any of the comics. I don't think it is at all.
I've got another interview. This one was from 2012, an interview with David Goyer. They asked him the question, "You're developing ownership of this franchise." So this is presumably after he's written all 3 movies. "How much of it is coming from you?"
And he directed the 3rd one.
He did direct the 3rd one, and it's terrible, allegedly. "Even with the first one," he said, "a lot of it was me. Even if you know from the comic books, I mean, Blade didn't even use a sword. He used mahogany daggers and things like that. He wasn't really a samurai or anything like that. And Deacon Frost was literally a church deacon in the South.
Right.
He looked kind of like Colonel Sanders.
Right.
And Blade wasn't even initially a hybrid, like you said. He didn't have to feed and all that stuff, and Whistler didn't exist either. It took a while for the first Blade to get made, and Marvel decided they liked the Whistler character so much that when Blade guest starred on the Spider-Man cartoon, they put Whistler in the cartoon.
Yes.
And the movie hadn't even come out yet.
Yes, I was aware of that, yeah.
Now, I think this is what an adaptation is, to my mind.
Okay.
They've taken a character,
Yeah.
a fairly obscure one.
Yeah.
They've kept what really matters intact. I
Yes.
suppose, like his ethnicity, the fact that he hunts vampires, his origin story.
Yes,
He's-
that's all there, yeah.
Not only and they've taken it and run with it and made it kind of like and it's become so. And it's such a good adaptation, such an effective adaptation, that it is now the canon
Yes.
for the character.
Yes.
So seen in that Whistler is adapted back into
Yes.
the Marvel properties, the Spider-Man cartoon. So this, for me, is the textbook definition of a good adaptation.
I think that's happened a few times with various Marvel movie things that ended up in the comics afterwards. But
Yeah.
I do think you're right that they did get all the core elements right. And in fact, I think even jettisoning the thing like that, Marvel wasn't. Chris Claremont and Marv Wolfman were not consistent about his accent and what country he came from, in a sense. So it kind of cleans up that mess and it makes more sense of it.
Yeah.
So I guess I should say, it is the best way you could adapt a character that nobody cared about. It had only appeared 40, 50 times up to that point as a supporting character most of the time.
This is as obscure. If we're talking about, I know this is not an MCU film, but is there a more obscure character that's been adapted in a Marvel movie?
Into their own movie?
Yeah. Howard the Duck, maybe? But that precedes this one, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I would say like Falcon. I think they're getting there. I think even Iron Man was not a top... He was a third-tier character. Ant-Man, these were not characters that people... I guess they were in the Avengers, but people didn't really care about.
So I think this is barely a comic book movie.
Yeah.
Because it's like we've said over and over, it's like you said, there's no... Blade didn't even have a comic out at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
It's more like... It's literally an adaptation. So we've taken something obscure and made something new with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I think this is less interesting or less important as an anecdote in the history of Marvel than it is the first film in this other wave of cinema.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The Matrix, Ultraviolet, Underworld, etc.
Yeah. Okay, so please support our Patreon.
Yes.
So we can keep the lights on and buy books and movies for the show. And please
favorite.
rate, review, subscribe. Is that the 4? Maybe in the wrong order?
Rate, review, subscribe. Please visit our Facebook page.
Yes, if you're an old person or you're on Facebook, go to Facebook. There is no Twitter. There is no... what's the kid one?
Instagram? TikTok.
There's no Instagram. There's no TikTok. There's... What's the video game one that all the kids... Not Twitch. There's
not Twitch?
No, we're not on Twitch either anyway. We're not on...
Can you imagine?
The kids
this
use some
would be a really great setting for
thing.
I don't know. We could do a Twitch
My son is on it all the time, and it is... What is it called? This is amazing that I can't remember what the hell this thing is called.
But to digress a moment, this is not... If you could see this, listeners, this is not a bad setting for a Twitch stream. I am surrounded by nerd paraphernalia.
Yeah.
This is like being inside Kumar's mind.
Anyway, we're not on that thing that I can't remember what the name of it is anyway.
No.
So anyway, go to those things. Okay, next week we're gonna do the Tomb of Dracula anime.
I hope you haven't had enough of Tomb of Dracula, because we're doing it again.
So I think we might maybe read like the end of the run, that the point
that you mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, that where Jim Shooter canceled it, the last few issues or so. And I'm not sure what aspects the anime covers. I only know it's famously there's a scene where Dracula eats hamburgers in it. So there's a few versions you can find on YouTube if there's anybody out there that's following along and watching the movies before the episodes. So you can watch the old dub from Streamline, I believe. Just go on YouTube. It's called Dracula Sovereign of the Damned. Is I believe the title. But within the last year, a fan subbing group uploaded a really nice quality version in Japanese with English subtitles.
Right.
So I think we'll probably watch that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if the subtitles are just the English dub words just transferred over, if somebody's actually sat down and translated it. But if we watch 5 minutes and are really bad, I might switch over to the Streamline version.
Well,
but there's like 2 or 3 on
you're the expert.
YouTube, and we'll figure it out for next week.
See you then.